Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and this is part 2 of our top 100 favorite board games of all time. And today we are counting them down from 90 to 81.
And these are our favorite games. It's an incredibly subjective list. We didn't mathematically calculate the best 100 games of all time.
I wish we could. I wish there was, if someone could make a mathematical formula and then they just prove, like, oh, it was Brass Birmingham. That would be amazing. But we don't have that yet, so we just made them up.
And let's get right to it with our number 90.
My number 90 is Downforce. And Downforce it's like kind of a hybrid of racing game and betting game. And in it you start off buying cars. You'll have 1 or 2 cars for the race, so obviously you want those to win. But every time you play a card, it's going to move a whole bunch of cars. It's going to have from 1 to 6 cars on it. So some of the cards that you play will move every car that is on the track. It is very hard for Canadians to say card and car separately, so stay with me. But you're going to move all of the cars, whether or not they're your car. But once someone passes one of these little betting lines, all of a sudden you've got money on the other cars as well, because you can bet on anybody's car. So you're a little bit invested in other people winning, and of course you're invested in you winning, and the winner is someone who kind of does both of those things the best.
Yeah, you can win the game without having won the race, which is interesting. And we really like Downforce, so we picked up a couple of the map packs that just change it up a little bit. Like one of them adds animals to the track, and then there's another one where you like go through a jump and jump over shark-infested waters, and that's nice just to mix things up.
Yeah, jumping over sharks is awesome. There's also a figure 8 one that looks very 80s, but the whole thing is just, it's super fun. It's super crazy. It's terrific at the full 6. It's okay at 2, but if you got a full 6 players, it's such a good party game. And that is my number 90.
My number 90 is Flamecraft. And in Flamecraft, you are placing these dragons out into shops. And this lovely world where humans and dragons work together to run these delightful little shops in a village. And when you go to a shop, you have the option of collecting a bunch of resources and using one of the dragons that are there. Or you can spend those resources for these enchantments, which are these upgrades that get you a lot of the points that you'll be getting throughout the game, and use all of the dragons. But it's just such a charming production. I really like the Flamecraft world, so it's a delight every time we pull it out.
Yeah, and I think I've said this before, but I want there to be a cartoon. Like, I see the characters and their cute names and their cute pictures, and I would love there to be a little Flamecraft cartoon. In this game, it's such a good like gateway game for worker placement. This is because it's cute, it's adorable, it's got terrific player rates. The stuff you're doing simple, but it's got enough to it that it's interesting. There's the variation of the cards. Yeah, it's really solid.
Yeah, the variation of the cards does change it up, as well as the variation of the shops, because those can do really different things too. And that is my number 90.
My number 89 is Dinosaur World. And Jurassic Park, at least the first trilogy, are some of my absolute favorite movies in the world. Even the third one I kind of love. And this is that. This is Jurassic Park, the board game. And this is even more Jurassic Park, the board game, than Dinosaur Island was. Dinosaur Island, raw and right, however, terrific. Super fast setup. I thought about putting it on this list, but I thought, I'm going to put one from the series. So that's my quick honorable mention. I'm sneaking in here from that one. But Dinosaur World is just, it's everything that you would want. You're hiring your specialists. You're making the DNA and building dinosaurs. You're actually building your park. You're driving a Jeep through your park and doing all the stuff and showing the tourists your dinosaurs. Of course, some of them are getting eaten. It's really fun. It does take up your whole table, though. You got to have a huge table to play this with more than 2.
Yeah, it is massive, but I really do like the tile placement as you build out your park and trying to figure out what attractions need to go next to each other, because when you move your Jeep through it, you can only move your Jeep so many spaces, and you need to go through spaces that you haven't been to before because the people get bored of seeing the same dinosaurs.
Who are these jaded people? I would never get bored of seeing dinosaurs, but that is my 89.
My number 89 is First Rat. And in First Rat, you are rats that are collecting up a whole bunch of junk to build spaceships and head off into space as rastronauts, which is a wonderful term. And it's deceptively simple what you do on your turn, because you can either move one rat 5 spaces or multiple rats like 1 to 3 spaces. And then for the things you land on, you get to collect the goods of the same color or do the actions. And so that seems like a really basic type of move, but there's enough happening because those spaces could like move a light bulb that gets you bonuses or move your rat along a tunnel that gets you more rats, and so many different things happening that it can feel really nice when you pull off a good combo.
Yeah, it's weird because you look at this and you're moving up a one-way track that shouldn't be this much fun. It looks like it's like a game from the 80s, but it kind of plays like what if a game from the 80s was fun? Because it is. It's super fun, and it's fun because you can really max out some of those things too, like the light bulbs. So when there's this little light bulb, when it moves past you, you get extra everything behind that. And when you move that up high, you feel like you're cheating. You feel like I'm getting so much stuff, and that feels really good. So this was a surprise.
And there are little bits that you can have as well, like comic books and superhero rats as well. And so it's fun to add those in and try different combos. And that is my number 89.
My number 88 is Parks. And Parks, kind of like First Rat, really is a game where you're just moving forward. We like games where you're kind of sharks. You just got to keep on moving forward. And in Parks, you're moving forward along a hiking trail. And wherever you land, you get the stuff there. When you get to the end of it, you can visit different national parks. And it's got this gorgeous art from the 50 Parks project or whatever it was called. And it looks so nice. But the game itself it's another one of these that the things you're doing are fairly simple. And when you hear about it, you think, it's not going to be that great, but it is. It's really fun. It takes kind of the ideas from Tokaido a little bit, but I think it builds on those in slightly interesting ways, and it adds this cool art and this cool theme. And yeah, I really like it, and I like it even more with the expansion as well. And we only have one of them. I think there's a second one, but we got the one with the campsites. And that adds another layer that's kind of just enough extra. It's that extra that I hoped for from the first game.
Yeah, I think it's the Nightfall expansion, and it does add just the right amount for us. I would agree, and I think it's just the production as well. Like the wooden tokens are amazing, and I love that the wild tokens they did as individual animals, which wasn't necessary, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really keen to play Henry Autobahn, who made it, his new game, Cosmoctopus. We played it briefly and really liked it, and I'm really keen to play a whole game of that too. But for now, my number 88 is Parks.
My number 88 is Maracaibo, and this is an Alexander Pfister game. And Alexander Pfister is an expert at multi-use cards, and I think that really comes across in Maracaibo, because your cards, you're using those for multiple purposes, as implied. One of those is the resources, so you can play your cards as resources to fulfill various contracts and that kind of thing, or you can spend money to play them out. And it is a really tough decision sometimes, because often you'll want to be able to do both. So that is one thing that I really like about Maracaibo, but the other is you set your own pace. So we play this at 2 players, and there are times when both you and I are going like only 1 or 2 spaces and doing a lot. And other times I really push the pace and I go as far as I can and I rush the end of the game. Sometimes that strategy works, sometimes it doesn't. But I do find it interesting being able to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say that as soon as you said that you can push the pace, I thought, well, you can push the pace, because I want to visit everything. And she's just like, go, 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 go. I will say that we got the expansion for this, and I love the ideas behind it. I think it meant to fix a lot of stuff, and I think it does kind of. But it just didn't quite work for us. I like it better as a competitive game, I think, than a co-op game.
Yeah, I would agree. But it's one I want to play more of. I feel like we didn't play enough last year, and this coming year, I hope we play a little bit more.
Yeah, and those double layer boards are great.
Oh, they are great, yeah. And that is my number 88.
My number 87 is Prodigal's Club, and I am a big fan of games that are kind of modular and give you different ways to play them, and this does this one of the best, I think, because in Prodigals Club, well, the main theme of it is that you're these horrible rich people who have this like bet where they need to get rid of everything that they own. It's kind of like a Brewster's Millions, but you've got this bet, you got to get rid of everything, or you've got to make everyone hate you or ruin your political career. And it's got these three different ways that you play this. So one of them is in your relationships, and there's this like kind of nosy, pushy matchmaker lady who's trying to matchmake you and you're messing with her. One of them is all of your possessions and money, and one of them is your political it's like the political track. And so you're doing these insane things to ruin your political career. And each game you generally are going to play with two of those, and how those interact is just wildly different. If you've got the money one and the political one, it feels so different from the money and the relationship one. Or you can do a giant game and play with all three. We've only done it like twice, and it takes some doing and a lot of your brain. But I love that, moving them together. And just the game in general is fun as well.
Yeah, it has a really great theme, and your score, so you want all your scores to be as low as possible, but your final score is going to be whatever is the highest of those. And so that makes it really tricky. I find it a little bit stressful because you might be really killing it at being able to get rid of all of your money and things, and nearing the end of the game you're like, oh no, I'm like too popular in the social setting, I really have to fix this and get that one down too. And the games are so close that it really comes down, it feels like, to that last round and just getting that balance right between the two.
Yeah, I think every one of our scores is like a 2-point spread. And I do like that you've got to do everything. You can't just specialize on this one thing. If you're killing it here, you've got to focus over here now. But that is my number 87 Prodigals Club.
My number 87 is Brass Birmingham. And in Brass, you are building out the canal network for the first half, connecting the various buildings and industry. And then the second half, you're doing that with a railway track. So what is most interesting is a lot of the resources you need to build the things are shared on the board. So you might build like a coal factory, and then coal becomes available. And what you can do is, depending on like where you are and what you need it for, you can sometimes take from the other people or for yourself. And there's a little bit of that push or pull, because you sometimes want to take from yourself to flip your buildings over, but you sometimes want to take from others to save the resources for like another turn. Like beer can be highly contested resource. As soon as someone has beer out, everyone's trying to take the beer. And I think this is one we're a little bit slower to pull out. It's a bit darker. I think it feels more intimidating than it is. But once we play it, it flows a lot smoother than I expect.
Yeah, so we're slow to pull it out because I think I don't like it. But even as you talk about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I do like it. And every time we play it, Jess is always like, no, you like it. We'll get it out. And I'll be like, oh, I don't think I like it. And then we start playing it. I'm like, oh, right, I really like it. It's just something about the theme and the darkness of the art, and it looks so like Dickensian, and I'm just like, oh, I'm not gonna like this. And then we play it, and every time I'm like, oh, I really like this. So I totally did forget to put this on my list because I think I don't like it. But even as you talk about it, yeah, it is. It's a great game. It's just that theme and the look. I don't know. I wish this was brighter. If this was the same game but with dragons. Like if the Flamecraft dragons were delivering the ales, I'd be into it.
That is true, because I do like the theme. I do find it interesting, the transition of like the railway network and everything, but the darkness does make it a bit of a barrier. So I could see it being a Flamecraft theme being very appealing. And that is my number 87.
My number 86 is Red Cathedral. And here I was just talking about not liking dry themes. And this is as dry as you get. You're building an old cathedral with the stuff you build cathedrals with. So you got bricks and wood and whatnot, and it's got this really cool mechanism though, where you're just moving around this rondel, and wherever you land, you do both whatever the power is in that quadrant, as well as you get the stuff from that place. And then you are putting that stuff on the pieces of the cathedral in order to get points. That's basically the game. So it's fairly dry, the theme. It's a pretty simple game, but there's a lot of complexity and a lot of depth in those decisions, and especially with the first expansion, which adds a ton because it gives you all these different characters for those quadrants. You only use one a game, but that one really shifts how the game plays, and it also adds this map that's kind of a little mini area control-ish, not really, but kind of this little mini game that connects up to the different towers of the cathedral too, that adds a couple layers. But for the size of the box as well, this is so much game for such a little compact box, and I really like this one.
That's exactly what I was going to add. It was the box size is delightfully small for a full game. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the map being a bit of area control, but the game itself really primarily is area control too for the towers.
Right.
Because whoever has the most decorations and ornaments on the various towers will get to score the majority of the points. And yet, I don't know, I'm usually not a big fan of area control, but this does it so nicely. I think because of the interesting like rondel dice system and the resources, and then you can even just like let somebody have a tower and completely take control over another one. So it doesn't do area control in a very mean way.
And it was just a huge surprise and has been a hit, and that is my 86.
My 86 is Grand Austria Hotel. And in Grand Austria Hotel, you are welcoming visitors and you are providing them with like wine and pastries as you prepare their rooms to check them in. So it's that time that we all know in hotels between when you check in, you lounge about, and then you get your room.
I love the theme for this, that it's just an hour between check-in and between getting your room and going into your room. What an insane theme.
It's great. So I do love the theme. But how it works, it's a dice drafting game. And so all the dice get rolled, and then the more there are of a value of dice, so if there's like lots of 5 for that action, that means that you can take a dice and that action is stronger. So I really like the mix of, there is a little bit of strategy because you are aiming for certain goals, but so much of your decision is tactical. It's based on what is available at that time. If maybe you weren't going to get any money, but all of a sudden you can get a lot, you're going to go for it. You're going to take the dice that gives you a lot of money and shift gears a bit.
I don't love this game. I will just tell you straight up. It just has a lot of dice. You could not pay me to play this with more than 2 players because it is a lot of thinking on your turn. It's very, very tight. So if you like a game that is extraordinarily tight, that is this. Everything is going to be like to the resource that you can do it. Or for me, always one resource short, it feels like. And like the people at the tables are cool. I can see the value of this game. Like I get why people like this game so much. And I think for the right audience, it's so good. But it might just be that I always lose it. I don't know. I have bad dice luck with it or something. But this one doesn't resonate with me as much.
Yeah, and I think it is because of the tightness, and there's like various tracks that your only goal is just to go up so you don't get a negative effect.
Yeah.
And that can be a little bit tricky. But still, we usually play it too. 1 week I can convince Shawn to play it.
We only play it too, yeah.
And I do like the 2-player game, and that is my number 86.
My number 85 is Spirit Island. And Spirit Island's a game that we used to play a lot. And we used to play this together a lot. It's a co-op game, so that's how you play it. And then we got a lot of the expansions, and that kind of, I feel like it became a bit too much overhead and we kind of stopped playing it. But what has happened recently is I just stripped out those expansions, went back to the base game and started playing it solo. This game shines at solo. Everyone talks about how strong this is at solo, but I used to not be a solo gamer. But as I've kind of, dipped my toe into those waters a little bit, people are right. This is such a good solo game, and especially just the stripped back, like getting back into it with just that base game has really been interesting for me.
Yeah, and even the base game, there's still so many like levers you can pull to add the complexity that we haven't even ventured near to. But I could see people playing this hundreds of times as they make it harder and harder and add in the different layers. I do think it works great as a two-player game as well.
Yeah.
And I love the theme of you're trying to like fight off these invaders because you're like the people and the spirits of the land. That's a fantastic theme. And then the asymmetry of the characters you are makes such a difference as well for how you play.
Yeah, the different spirits feel so different. And it is nice that there's that expansion stuff because especially the branch and claw, I think, like as you add that stuff to the base game, it does add a little bit and adding the different invaders and everything, but I'm not good enough at it yet. And you can get really good at this, I assume, but I'm low to mid-level still, but even at that, it's really fun, really solid solo game as well. And that is my 85.
My number 85 is My City. And My City is a tile placement game, but it is a campaign. So you work through different chapters and each bit adds a little bit more rules and you are left with a game at the end. That being said, we played through it 2 players and that meant that we could play through the campaign fully twice. Which was great because that was a lot of games that we played. And I love tile placement games and I love campaign games. And it works so well to be able to do that where each game is just enough different and the puzzle of figuring it all out is engaging.
Yeah, it is. And it's weird not having seen each other's lists first because boy, are there a lot on your list. I wish I had remembered. And this is another one. And the reason I forgot it is that it's a campaign game. So we had played through it and then we played through it again. And then we just kind of forgot about it because no one plays a campaign game after they're done, with the one exception being Clank. So we had just forgotten about it, and I had just forgotten about it. But I wish I hadn't because it really was a terrific experience both times as well. It was almost as fun the second time as it was the first time.
And I do think, well, we'll see, but I imagine if My Island comes out and if we play a lot of that next year, that it will probably replace it because these lists are a look of the past year, really. And campaign games just tend to fall a little bit lower. And that is my number 85.
My number 84 is another small box campaign game, and that is The Crew, and specifically The Crew Mission Deep Sea. Although the first one's great too, but the second one just kind of smooths out some of the rough edges. But The Crew is this trick-taking game where it has kind of a campaign, but the campaign's really, it's just different little missions that you've got to do, or different parameters and goals that you have to meet when you're doing your trick taking. It's the point of your trick taking. But the crazy thing about this game is everyone says the 2-player version isn't very good. Even the box kind of says the 2-player version isn't very good. We've only ever played this at 2 players, which is weird. We really like it at 2 players. It might be because we have no idea what we're missing out on with more players, but just the possibility of being able to play a trick-taking game and a campaign trick-taking game with 2 players was really interesting to us. And we've played it, because we played all the way through both. We've played this like 100 times at what everyone says is the worst player count and have really enjoyed it.
I think it plays differently, but we like having the row of visible cards you play with in 2 players because that means there is this shared information and everything else is hidden. But having that shared information, I think, leads to some interesting decisions. It puts a lot of pressure on the captain who also has to choose the card. So I always hope that Shawn's the captain. I feel like you do better under pressure.
Every time, Jess, when we hand out the cards, you know she's got the captain card because she's...
Yeah, it's cooperative, but the captain has a lot of responsibility, and Shawn is a great captain.
But that is my 84.
My number 84 is the networks. And in the networks, you own a TV network. So you are drafting different television shows and adding stars and adding ads. And the TV shows are all puns on like existing TV shows, which is kind of funny the first time around. But what made this game really good for me was once we added in the expansion, because then you're playing as asymmetric networks that really change up a little bit your focus. And I think why this game I think is new to the list this year is every year we try and play through all of our games at least once. And when we played the networks, I really liked it because it felt so different from so many of our games. There went through a while where we played like a bunch of worker placement games and a bunch of engine building games, and then this one just seems so refreshing that's I think why it cracked my top 100 this year.
And I know that they actually came out with a 2-player specific, the network, the dual, I believe, that I think is like a little bit meaner, but the original network works great at 2 players. Like if you want a 2-player experience, but you don't want, I think there's meanness. Don't quote me on that. Look it up first. But I believe there's meanness. And if you don't want that meanness and you just want to get the base game and play that with 2 players, it 100% works that way. And yeah, I totally agree. The expansion and those asymmetric powers just added a lot to it.
And that's what made it my number 84.
My number 83 is Dice Throne. And I'm kind of including all of Dice Throne, but I think specifically Marvel Dice Throne, just because I connect a bit more with the characters, and I think that they've streamlined the game, partly because it's the latest set to come out. So I think they fixed a lot of the things from the earlier versions. And Dice Throne's basically just competitive Yahtzee. You're rolling dice, and you got 3 times to do it, and whatever results you end up with, you're connecting up to the different powers that are on your board. You've got kind of 8 or so different possible combinations that will set off different things. Some that attack other people, some that set off your different superpowers. One of them, if you get basically like a Yahtzee in this game, you get your super ultimate, which is unblockable, and then you're just trying to damage the other person till they're dead, I guess. And it's fun to mix and match the different boxes from it. And every time we play, I feel like we don't just play one, we have like a little mini tournament of it.
Yeah, it is fun playing the different characters because even though it's so simple, they do all feel a little bit different. And I think there's something a little bit addictive about chasing that ultimate move. It's happened so rarely, and we've come so close so many times that I always want to play because to pull off this big ultimate, and even if I don't win, if I can pull off an ultimate, that's a win.
Yeah, it's like when you're playing Yahtzee. When you get to yell Yahtzee, you're really feeling that joy of, oh, I rolled 5 matching numbers. I don't know why. It's just humans. That's how we are. And that's how I am with Dice Throne, and it is my number 83.
My number 83 is Scythe by Stonemaier Games, and this one I think would have been much higher a couple years back when we were playing the Rise of Fenris campaign, because I really loved that campaign experience. But it's still a really interesting game. If you're not familiar, you are a faction on a board and you are trying to do as you choose your actions, you do a top action, and if you have the resources, you get to do the bottom action. So it's a really interesting efficiency puzzle to try and maximize being able to do both actions. I think the tricky though is one of those actions is combat, and my feelings get a little bit hurt because I'll be working kind of 3 turns in advance, and I'll be like, okay, I'll do this and I'll do this, and then I can pull off this big thing, and then Shawn comes and fight me, and I'm like, no, I was gonna fight you next turn. I wasn't ready for you to fight me this turn. But it's still great, and it looks really lovely.
Yeah, we've talked about a few on your list that you kind of have to talk me into, and I feel like this is one that I have to talk you into.
Yeah.
Rise of Fenris, we went through that like 3 times. I think we did it twice with just the 2 of us, and once actually over Zoom with some friends in the States, and it was really fun all the time. But I always love this game. It's just I love the world that it's in. That top bottom action selection thing is so clever. Everything about this game, it really fits what I want in a game, and I'm glad that you will play it with me, and I'm very happy to see that it's on your list at all.
Yeah, and I do love the asymmetry because the factions all play so differently. I'm looking forward to trying Expeditions, which takes place in the same world. Hopefully we'll play that sometime this year, but for now, Scythe is my number 83.
My number 82 is Earth, and Earth is a pretty new game. It came out at the start of this year, and it's a little bit of kind of a gateway game. I feel like I've got a lot of gateway games in this, like 80 to 100. They're gonna get heavier, but right now these are all games I think are so great to get new people into the hobby, and I have such a warmth for that kind of game. And Earth has maybe a bit of a similar feeling to what Wingspan brings, kind of, but instead of birds, you're building the earth. And so you're putting out cards into rows, and you're building a tableau that's going to be 4x4. So it's going to be 16 total cards. And there's goals that are saying that you want these sorts of things in this row, and you want it to match with this other thing or whatever. And then there are also powers on each of these cards. And every turn, someone can choose one of 4 different actions. They're mostly going to pick the first action because that builds cards, but they're going to do the other stuff too. And whenever they choose one of those actions, you set off every power that connects to that action. So you can build these cool little engines where you're getting all sorts of different stuff. And it's simple, like it's a simple rule set for what can turn out to be this kind of complex engine, but it's a light enough complexity that it's something that you can bring new players into games with that maybe would have been into Wingspan but don't love birds, but want something like that. And I really appreciate that about Earth.
Yeah, it definitely is approachable, but with depth. And you can find some really fun combos as you build out your tableau, and the placement of all your cards is really important too. And even though it is very much you're building your tableau, it is interesting the little bit of interaction, because there are times when I'll be like, oh, I don't really want to go to the space to play a card yet, but you don't have a lot of soil. So I'm going to go here now because that means you won't get to go on your turn. So it is interesting to try and figure out how you can do a little bit better than your opponent. I
will say, though, that little bit of interaction is probably a pretty good description of that. But even without that, I think it just brings something to the hobby that's always nice to have, and that is my 82.
My number 82 is Colt Express, which has a lot more interaction than Earth does. And in Colt Express, you are different cowboy characters that are all on a train, and you're all trying to perform a heist. And how you do this is you play out your cards. So you go around and you each play out a card, but you don't do the actions of those cards until the end of the round when all of them get flipped over. So it can be really tricky to not only remember what you have already played and where you're going to be, but where your opponents are going to be. And we do play this as 2 players, where we play 3 characters each, which again makes it so much more complicated, and you end up like shooting yourself and punching the air, and it feels like there's almost a bit of a narrative that comes through, which is lovely.
Yeah, there really is, where like, oh, Tuco, stop shooting everybody. Stop it. Stop shooting the roof. It's craziness. And you're picking up the jewel, then you're losing the jewel, and you're trying to get the suitcase, and it's fun too, because sometimes 2 suitcases can come out, and you're trying so hard to get that, and then how did I climb to the top of this train? And now I got pushed to the back of this train, and I got shot by my friend. And yeah, I love a game that has a lot of chaos, and this has like the most chaos.
And there's often times when you'll move the marshal to your spot accidentally, and you're like, no, what am I doing? Now I'm on top, and the whole plan is ruined, and the rest of that round, you're just like doing nothing on your own. It's good fun, and that's why it's my number 82.
My number 81 is Heat Pedal to the Metal, and this is the newer racing game from the team that brought us Flamme Rouge, and it takes kind of the heart of that, which is a game that we both really like, and puts it into auto racing. And it does feel quite a bit different from Flamme Rouge. This feels a lot more like auto racing. So you're going around this track by playing your cards, but you've got, whenever you go around a corner, you have to go at like a certain speed. And if you go more than that, then you gain heat. And heat is kind of this, it's really interesting because it's like this negative thing, but you want to have it available so that you can spend it, and you have to spend it if you're going to win. So the game forces you to take a certain amount of risk and to kind of balance that risk reward as you go, to be like as risky as you can without being just too risky, which I feel is kind of like the heart of auto racing. So I think it catches that so nicely, and it has such a good 2-player version because there's just really simple bots and they work shockingly well. Like, they beat us a lot.
Yeah, the bots are really competitive, but what is nice is in the base game, it adds in a whole bunch of modules that you can include. So there is weather you can add that changes up how certain parts of the track work. There's also sponsorship cards. There's a tournament gameplay you can play where you're able to carry over these upgrade cards from race to race, which is really interesting because we always love playing a tournament.
Yeah, Flamme Rouge, we would do a thing where you use an app to play a whole bunch. Here, you can just do it built in, and it's cool that those cards kind of build up and carry over. And even if you don't play the, like, whatever it's called, championship mode or whatever, even just if you're playing one race, you can do this card drafting version of it too, where you can switch up the cards that are in your hand and have slightly different hands from the other players too. So it's one we played a lot, and that is my 81.
My number 81 is Underwater Cities, and this is our second Vladimir Suchy game on the list because you had Prodigal's Club earlier on.
Oh yeah, I forget that that's him. Yes.
Yeah, and in Underwater Cities, you are building out an underwater city, and how you're doing that is on your turn, you can play a card and go to a space, but if you go to a space that's the same color as the card you play, you get to do both. So again, interesting decisions in terms of I really need to go to that space, but I don't have a card that matches. So trying to work out whether it's worth just kind of giving up on that card or finding maybe a better combination.
I feel so sheepish because there are so many on your list that I'm just like, how did I forget this game? How did I forget this game? It kind of takes all the stuff that you like about terraforming Mars, I feel like, and just like focuses a bit more, but I feel like it gives me some of the same feel, just with like an extra bit of like tightness and difficulty to it. My tricky, and probably why it's off, is I lose a lot.
And I think that is the tricky with this one, is because you are building out these buildings that play into your income that you get each round, is if somebody gets a really strong income round going early, they go out in the lead, and it's honestly really hard for the next person to catch up. So we have had games where there has been like 50-point differences between us.
This is one of those games where either you feel like, oh, I'm cooking, I got it, I'm nailing it, or like, why can't I do anything? My city will never grow. Everyone will drown. It's really, it's all or nothing every time.
But when it works, it really works. And that's why Underwater Cities is my number 81.
And that is it. That brings us all the way down to 81, which means next time we're going to be kicking it off at 80.
And in this past chunk, we didn't have any of our games that crossed over, which was interesting.
That blows my mind that we didn't even have one. And we've had almost nothing if you count our full top 20 as well, which I bet in the first one we chose how many exact crossovers we were going to have. I said 4, you said 2. I am very glad I didn't put money on that.
But as usual, thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you've played, if you liked any of the games we talked about. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.